Hey, archeopunks. This is Josh here, and something I wanted to do for a while is to go through all of the pages in ArkWorld and pointing out sort of like the old school DVD commentaries about what thought process went into all of these different scenes and kind of like peel back some of the layers. And there's so much in here we're doing when it comes to this like lost ancient advanced civilization and technology and everything. So much more than just myself and the artist Travis going like, hey, make those pyramids look cool, or like put some flying shit in the background. There's a lot that goes into it. We try to, sort of the way that I keep always referring to, like the way Star Trek tries to make all of their, weird spatial anomalies and the way their ships work and everything actually work based on some kind of real theoretical, scientific projection, except we do it backwards. So let's get to it. All right. So page one, Perth, Australia. These guys are digging away, which leads us into page two, and boom, right away, what we have here is this construction crew has found a very strange anomaly, which is this upside down cone-shaped stone chamber, craft, temple. We don't know what it is, but if you're familiar with ancient Indian Vimana, that should look pretty familiar. We'll get into that a little bit more later. Inside, we are introduced for the first time to who will be revealed as Seth Kotep, and awakening from this chamber, you don't really know what's going on yet, but everything looks high-tech, but it's all dark and dingy and made of what looks to be stone. And then inside of this, looks like your classic sci-fi stasis cryo chamber. Usually people are frozen or they're in some sort of weird goo like Neo in the Matrix. This is all organic. This is a weird combination, which it's this weird mix of what I envision as soil and like all kinds of weird microbiome. There's also like lots of mycelia and mushrooms and just a whole little ecosystem in here. Obviously these plants, and we have what would be like an amazing scene in a live action setting, just where he has to pull the plants out of all of his different orifices and out of the eye. So it's to imply that the plants are actually going up through his nose into his mouth and anywhere you want to imagine, providing nutrients and sustenance and oxygen, and it's like this entire like little self-contained biosphere, and it preserves the person's body while putting them into a sleep stasis. Just thought it'd be a fun take on, what sort of a classic trope we've seen in a lot of sci-fi over the years. Then he's going up to this next level. We don't know much about this guy, but he does have these tattoos. There's like a triangle pyramid looking tattoo with 3 dots up on his shoulder. There's the twisting snake tattoos on his back. And then we realize that whoever he's looking for, which we later learn is Cleoto, is nowhere to be found. And her little dirt chamber has already been opened and she is long gone. It was really important that when we finally meet Seth in this flashback scene where we're not sure exactly what's going on yet, really needed to feel like a modern apartment. Like one of the important things about this story, which takes you back into the distant past, is I wanted the characters to feel like real people and feel like how people talk naturally today. One of the things in film and really all forms of media and fiction, whenever we deal in America anyway with people from the distant past or people from some other world, so often it's just you revert to this sort of like an English accent and this sort of proper way of speaking, and I just didn't want that with any of this, because everything about ArkWorld is constantly pushing against not feeling like some swashbuckling like Lord of the Rings, anything like that. No matter how fantastical some of the elements get, I want it to just feel real. But we, there's just something's a little off here. Like what's this weird floating little pyramid thing? Is this somewhere in the future, or is that just some little novelty magnet clock that anyone could have today? There's a picture in the mirror. So all that stuff, we went through all this back and forth on, back in this time, did they print photos? Did they have LED screens, or how advanced is this civilization? And I decided we don't want there to be modern looking sort of electronic computers, and if there are, it's like a very limited capacity. Getting into the rest of Seth's apartment, he's on what appears to be a telephone, but it's just kind of bizarre. It looks almost like an old school brick cell phone, but there's a cord attached to it. The kitchen has these weird pyramidal shapes to it, and what this is actually for, this is like the beginning of a glimpse into sort of the subtle technology and like energetic beliefs that this world has. Here, we're actually going off some very esoteric studies that have been done in the past, but it's thought it'd be fun to explore that things just pick up a different quality if they're in a sort of certain pyramid environment, and hence like the food here is kept in all of these different type of cabinets. The phones, we haven't really gotten into that yet. I don't want to like. I can get into that some of that later. We're going to get into how their communication devices work, but as you'll see later on, there are mobile communication abilities, but it's a lot more similar to having a telephone hanging on the wall than it is to like what we have now walking around with cell phones. Then cue to the quarry, where we learn that Seth works, whatever we define as working in a civilization. First, it just looks like sort of a weird kind of future-y quarry because this guy has this exoskeleton saw device that he's using. Other than that, everything actually looks kind of primitive too. But that's when Seth sets up these what we call magnopucks or res pucks, which this really tries to get into one of the most perplexing questions in all of this megalithic construction across the world, in the weight of these monstrous stones and the levels of detail and just the precision that was used, the mathematics and the engineering skill that was required, the knowledge of the earth that was required to have been able to put certain measurements into some of these things. The biggest question raised is like, why did they build everything out of stone? Like, why were all of these civilizations all across the world obsessed with building with this impossible to wield material? And kind of like an Occam's razor answer is, one reason would be because it wasn't that hard for them. And if it wasn't that hard, and one, maybe you did want to make sure you use the one material that was the most abundantly available and that would last, in essence, for eternity. The other is that it wasn't really that difficult for you to do it. If you follow the work of Christopher Dunn and a lot of the great videos on Uncharted X and a lot of the work that Graham Hancock's put into this, it's very clear that there's some kind of machine technology used back then. This doesn't mean aliens, it doesn't mean anything like that. But in ArkWorld, we're saying that the way that all of the pyramids were constructed, all these megalithic obelisks and buildings and what they call temples were constructed, had to do with some sort of sonic levitation capability, some sort of advanced electromagnetic science, and some better understanding of gravitational forces. And with that, basically Seth jumps in here, plop, 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 puts all of these little pucks all over the stone that needs to be moved over to the conveyor. And once the resonance is set, you're looking at a magnetic pole flip. And with that, it just becomes basically as light as balsa wood. You lift the thing up and moves over to the conveyor belt. In the scene where Seth is lifting this up for the first time, little subtle things that we do here is the way that the guy with the console, this device is just sort of floating there. The colorist naturally wanted to put it in like glowing. It's floating. The magnetic, the sphere in the bottom was glowing. The screen's glowing, and that's something that is really important to me in this. Is that I keep pulling it back. It's almost like the artist wants it to be dramatic and exciting. And I'm always like, no. The whole thing, what makes this different, it makes this a unique world, is that's not amazing. There's plenty of fascinating, amazing stuff in here. If you understood a better understanding of magnetism and quantum locking, and if you haven't seen this video on quantum locking, check that out. It's sort of the beginning of us understanding some of this stuff. It's pretty crazy. If you could have devices that float around, then why? It would just sort of like hover there. It wouldn't look like some crazy glowing device with like CGI looking like things floating all around it. It'd just sort of be this nondescript device that's floating there. It's very utilitarian, and that's what we have here. So always in these scenes, I'm going back and like pulling back some of the effects. This quickly leads us over to the scene where Seth puts this massive like 70-ton stone onto what they consider the like levitating conveyor belt, which, if you're familiar with a little thing called the H blocks, get a little shout out there. So those those are based on some pretty mysterious, very, very precisely cut stones that are found all the way across the world in Pumapunku. This is because here we're supposed to be in where will eventually thousands of years later become Egypt. But the H stones are fascinating. There's not just like the precision with the way that they were cut, the identical nature of all of them. There are holes drilled in them that kind of defy logic for their time, and no one knows where the hell they came from. So from here, I just imagine that this giant stone is just going to go float off somewhere into the sky. It's going to go, with a whole bunch of other like train tracks. You're going to have a bunch of like giant rocks and stuff just going down some sort of different pathways in the city. And to us, if we saw that, it would freak us out and it would be amazing. But to them, it's just no big deal. It's just, because if you, again, like taking it back, so this isn't some crazy flashy technology, in their eyes, if we had these capabilities, it would just be commonplace. We don't lose our minds when an airplane flies by. We don't lose our minds when we see magnets, just hovering around some little novelty toy, and that's just how this is to them. But it's not like you can just float this stuff anywhere. You need to set up certain parameters for it and have the right whatever, some kind of energy field, for lack of a better term, has to do with the sonic levitation, electromagnetism, etc., etc. So that's when moving into the school, we meet Adam for the first time, and I sort of see this civilization as they're way more advanced than us in certain ways. They're we would seem to be more primitive than us in other ways. But school in this world, you don't have the typical structure of the bell ringing and you go from class to class. It's a little less like you're on your own, and if you ask for collaboration and help, you're cheating. It's more like you're not supposed to know the answers to everything, and you're supposed to be forced to collaborate with everyone else, because that's how humanity and civilization works. All right, going to the next page. Here was the first glimpse. I wanted to ease people into it. I wanted to make you slowly realize, like, okay, this is definitely like some kind of advanced society. It's looking more and more like this might be Earth, but maybe this is some other world. I'm not sure. And but these pyramids, the pyramids back here are intentionally white with gold at the top. And we've also got these flying craft, which are our first time we're showing anything flying in this ancient world. They're more like these sort of floating Zeppelin airships. Those weren't really specifically patterned off of anything specific from actual like archaeology or mythology even. They're just supposed to look cool. But the pyramids, though, the real Giza pyramids back in the day were supposed to have been covered with polished sheets of like bright white limestone, and it's thought that they may have had golden tops, or golden like caps at the top. So if you could just imagine that, if you really have seen good images, or if you've been to Egypt where you've seen just how massive the Great Pyramid is, and then just to imagine those things pristine and brand new, and with like shining white limestone that you would see from miles and miles away as you're coming up on that city, you can imagine how, life-altering just seeing that for the first time would be. All right, now we're back with Seth in the chamber. He's waking up, and there's one little Easter egg here. If you've seen the little symbol on that is the DMT molecule, is what's on that little bottle there in the first panel. And there's another little thing in there that's like a little, what they call buckyball. And that's a little wink and a nod to Buckminster Fuller, who I take a lot from in this, and something that he theorized, which was later discovered, it was called a carbon-60 molecule. And actually now that's this sort of breakthrough discovery about this naturally occurring molecule that is known to have doubled the lifespans in rats. It's one of the most anti-inflammatory compounds and has all of these possibly curative properties, and it's being patented now for stopping tumor growth. And I thought, there's I want something that's going to be like a neurocognitive booster, because someone who's been asleep for God knows how long. There's going to be the DMT gets into the very beginning of what we're going to learn about the science that powers this world is not just all this giant stone and levitation and everything else. They also have a completely different understanding of mind-altering substances, psychedelics, and the whole lot of that whole category of drugs. You'll notice that in the back in here, everything's very dark. He takes this, he takes these pills or this little cocktail of drugs that are in this capsule, and then suddenly it's as if the whole chamber lights up. From there, he even passes out for a second. But from there, it's lit up. There's displays in the background, and the idea here is what we're just starting to learn, or what people theorize. Like if it's like Paul Stamets, even like Joe Rogan's DMT special, or Graham Hancock wrote a book on some of this stuff too. And there's the Terence McKenna Stone Ape theory. All this stuff implies that maybe when people are on those substances, they're reporting seeing similar entities, similar locations even. It drives people to theorize maybe you're actually tapping into another deeper spectrum of reality that we can't normally see. And I just wanted to play with that. So here is a civilization that understands that intimately. They understand it where we may another 100 years from now. And, well, what if once you knew that, you could just dial it back? So you could actually just decide to see how much or how little that you want of this other layer of like reality. So for these purposes, if you just dial it up a little tiny bit, then you can tune into this reality where then you can see the light that's in here, you can see all of the controls, and you can interact with this machinery. So that is going to play a lot into what looks like just dull stone, dead, artifacts are actually working machines. And we've long since lost the technology to tap into this, and maybe you could just go like trip balls on mushrooms or something and luck out. and maybe you see some of it for like a fleeting second, and then it's gone. I don't know how many people have been able to sneak into like the Great Pyramids and do mushrooms. If you have, let me know. From there, so then we introduce this suit that Seth has, which actually he ends up just like commenting on it as a mobile field unit. This is sort of like a low-key version of the technology that he has back in the quarry, where he's lifting this massive stone. He realizes the entrance to this place, this thing he's supposed to get out of, is just completely just caved in with rocks, and he's actually able to like levitate and move some of them around. I just wanted to be able to play with the idea that, okay, there's different levels of this stuff, just like, you might have some like little portable device that's not as powerful as the big unit that you have. So now we're back in Ratas Kemet, which actually right away I should say the whole reason that name was chosen was Ratas. So with all of these names, I'm trying to pick names that eventually, thousands of years later, could still be left in the vernacular and could become the name of something else. And then now us in the present day, we just have little glimpses and glimmers of that. And so Kemet, if you study like Egyptian mythology, their own telling of their own history says that originally they were the land of Kemet, and it was the time of Zep-Tepi. Ratas is just sort of an amalgamation of different things. Ra, obviously, later, in what we now call the distant ancient Egyptian times, would be the almighty sun god. And that's just sort of like how all of the names in this are thought of. But they're not just, as much as possible, I'm not just like pulling them out of my butt. They're there with some sort of intention. Now we finally get a couple of good shots of the city of Ratas. And the idea here is, if you have this technology, if you can levitate all this stuff, you're going to show off this technology. So why do it just changes the thinking of how you construct everything. Why do floors even need to, connect to each other with stairs? If you have like furniture, why wouldn't it just float if it can just hover around and lock in place? You'd want to show that off all the time. Why would you have an escalator if you can have like a little belt or a platform or something you just step on that's safe and you just lower down? It doesn't mean you wouldn't have stairs. It doesn't mean that you would just make every single thing around you float all the time. But I mean, this technology would just be a normal part of everyday life. One of the things I like that Christopher Dunn goes into, if you're not familiar, if most people probably aren't familiar with him, he's this mechanical engineer who has gone in and studied extensively all kinds of artifacts in Egypt and in South America, and he just says like, look, here's how we would have to make this now. Here's using the precision tools and measuring how freakishly precise all these things are. Here's what would be required to do that, and here are the machines that we would need to do it with. And one of the paths you go down when you're thinking about that is that precision is always used, for very important things first. When we're going to go to outer space, or if you're going to build a skyscraper, the amount of engineering and mathematics that needs to go into that, it needs to be so perfect. There's so many simulations around to make it happen that you have to create these machines that can produce what you need in order to build those. Once you have that, then you can use it for anything. So then once we have gone to like the level of detail to be able to make the housing for this laptop I'm talking on right now, once you have that, you can use it to make like a toy. You can use it to make a doorknob. You can use that technology to make anything for novelty, and it'll be prevalent throughout the whole civilization. But it always starts with something more important. So anyway, you would have those elements of this anti-gravity stuff and all the this cool stone, floating stones, and all these capabilities being shown off in day-to-day life. And I think that's enough for the first video. So if you like that, we plan on doing more of these and going through all of the different Easter eggs that are in this book. Easter eggs, we should call these something else. Like, I don't know, like hidden artifacts. All right, so thanks for checking it out. I hope you dug it, and see you next time.